A Journey into the Unknown. Book 15, Secrets of the Unknown. Chapter 8. The first creative act was the reproduction of God, the reproduction of potential energy. And in the very next moment, the birth of kinetic energy. This was the Big Bang. And this preceded the birth of time concepts. The creative mind had to expand first before it started to create. Was there a creative mind who created the creative mind? Was there a God who then created a God network? The answer is yes. This is how it works. There is stillness, and then, at the conclusion of the dormant period, there is an explosion, a Big Bang, if you will. And then there are new parts of God, new prototypes, and a new creation period is ready to be ushered in. Time begins again, only to eventually stop again. Then, after hundreds of millions of years in potential time, there's another Big Bang. More Godheads. A new beginning of time. A new creative period. And then stillness. This has gone on and on like this. So now we can answer the question. Was there time before time? The answer is yes. As you can see, we are getting very close to the cessation of time once again. This explains a lot of what you see and experience in your world. This explains the intensity. This explains all of the outreach concerning Christ awareness, Christ consciousness, and Christ manifestation. The Hebrew Bible should have new light shed on it, because the creation story in Genesis has some good attempts at explaining all of this. It got the part about God resting on the seventh day right. Now, we will go in deeper. Chapter 9. Over the past creation cycles and rest cycles, God has multiplied itself with new aspects or Godheads. But what happens to all of the energy that animated form, directly or indirectly during a creation cycle? This is interesting because it involves you. This energy keeps getting recycled over and over again until it has reached a point when it vibrates at the same level as the Godhead. When this happens, it rejoins Source and is indistinguishable from it. It has lost all sense of individuality and differentiation. This has happened very rarely, even after all of the creation cycles. And there have always been creation cycles. Remember that the concept of beginning is merely a concept. It was created too, along with everything else. So what happens to energy that isn't at the Godhead level of purity yet? What happens to it at the end of a creation cycle? It is stored as potential energy until time starts again. But it isn't stored with pure energy. We don't mix the two. Chemically, they aren't well suited to each other. So they are kept separate. There is not a record, and all our records are meticulously detailed, of any amount of energy that has left a Godhead and not returned at least some degree of increase or interest. Here's another Bible reference. Even the most diabolically sinister character has an increase to turn in at the end of the day, believe it or not. Even Lizzie Borden herself smiled and held open a door for the parents she later beheaded. Love is love, and there is no loss in love. Now let's talk about Godheads. You will be shocked at this topic because you are in one. Chapter 10. God extends itself inside out, not outside of itself. This is why the traditional concept of God is so flawed. There isn't a God out there someplace because everything, including you, is inside God. It has been said that you are a thought of God. Well, where do thoughts reside? God creates by thinking, so everything you know and are familiar with is inside God. Likewise, everything you don't know about and are unfamiliar with is also inside God. There is nothing outside of God, absolutely nothing. We are very familiar with the illusion concept that plagues some of you. This is our chance to address this in a very simple way. We simply do not care if you think you yourself created your world experience from your tiny little brain or not. What is important is that you finally know, truly know, that you are a part of God, and the world that you know is a part of God, and the worlds you don't know about are part of God, and time and space is part of God, and your programming, your egos are part of God. Everything, absolutely everything, every choice and every compulsory action is part of God. You yourself actually live inside God and would not exist outside of it. This is what is important. We will return to this topic later on. Now, let's revisit a Godhead. Each Godhead is somewhat different from one another, but they are fundamentally structured the same. A Godhead has structure through dimensions. From the bottom up, they are layered from lower to higher. And from the external to the internal, they are also layered from lower to higher. God is always adding dimensions to itself. It's really a waste of time trying to explain more than a fifth dimension to a human being. But we just want to let you know that there are many more dimensions, and there always will be many more. Chapter 11. Your next question may very well be, how do the many Godheads relate to each other? And exactly how many are there? Good questions. The answer to the second one is that no one really knows. Let's say that the answer is infinity. It's a number that would not be comprehensible to the most intelligent computer. As for the first question, Godheads are symbiotic. They share information with one another. They have similar projects and dissimilar ones. The patterns and structures are all the same. They create in the same ways and use the same methodologies. There are realities that exist in one Godhead and not another. And there are duplicate realities in more than one Godhead that may have some type of unexpected twist. For example, in your reality, you all know what a grizzly bear looks like. There is at least one reality where a grizzly bear head would be on a zebra, and vice versa. Or there could be a play on animal nature. Instead of a tiger being a feared predator in one reality, it may be completely playful and docile. Every child would want one as a pet. But the common fly would be something to watch out for. If you can think it, know that God has and is thinking about it and creating it. This is because, once again, you yourself are a thought of God, a thinking part of God. The next topic we want to tackle is about suspended animation at the end of a growth period. How exactly does this work? Also, is there time and space between Godheads? The short answer is no. There is only God. And there is only more of God. Godheads create worldscapes with time and space, and they are internal. Imagine you being inside something else. Imagine your home, your town or city, your entire planet and universe being inside something else. That is the reality. Chapter 12. What will happen to you? What will happen to everything during the next rest cycle? The answer is suspended animation. What exactly does this mean? It's like being frozen. The scientific idea of cryonics is a close attempt at suspended animation. But they haven't brought anything back to life yet, because they don't know what life is. They don't know what animates form. And many scientists still believe that form animates itself. They have no spiritual insight at all. Not only will you be in forced stop mode, but so will everyone and everything you know and don't know. Everything just comes to a screeching halt, including time itself. Now for another Bible reference. In the book of Revelations, a 1,000-year period is mentioned, and that people will be brought back from the dead at the end of the 1,000-year period. This wasn't half bad, except that instead of 1,000 years, it will be hundreds of millions of years. But to us, it will be like a second. It will be like waking up from surgery, an especially long one, without the pain, of course. Why will this happen again? And why has it happened before? The easy answer is that it is part of the creative process. But you really don't have to look far for the answer. Just look at your own life experience. Rest is crucial. Many live for the weekend. They cherish sleeping late and staying in their pajamas all day without shaving or combing their hair, and maybe eating a bowl of Fruit Loops for dinner. This is how God and all parts of God feel about the great hibernation. It is sacred and healing. Now, let's talk more about reanimation. Chapter 13. As already indicated, we are at the end of a 2 billion year creation cycle. We need to go back to the beginning of this particular cycle to take a look at reanimation. This will give you ideas about previous reanimations and future ones. Before we move on, let's address the elephant in the room. We know that many of you have had an idea drilled into your tiny little heads. This idea is that time only has a now, and that there really isn't a past or a present. We can tell you that this is, in fact, true. And it is, in fact, a very freeing concept and way to live. However, creation does, in fact, have beginnings, middles, and ends. This is true, too. And humans are able to grasp this. While you don't want to live in the past or in the future, understanding these concepts is a good thing. You can visit any hospital and look through the window to see the newborn babies, just starting new segments of their life journeys. You can also go to a funeral home and see the shell of a life once lived. Something has ended, so that something can begin again. Our point is that the now concept is true, and time-based concepts, such as past and future, are true too. You don't want to give them too much power, but don't beat yourselves up for acknowledging them. They are part of creation. Picasso used to be a terrible artist when he first picked up art. You have to start somewhere. Now, where were we? Oh, reanimation. Please don't develop a fear about it, because you won't even know it's happening. None of us will. One day you'll be walking down Fifth Avenue in New York City, looking at all of the overpriced designer goods in the windows, and then time will stop. When it starts again, you will still be trying to decide if it's worth it to buy that coat and max out your credit card. Chapter 14. At the beginning of this creation cycle, everything that had started in the previous creation cycle and had been frozen during the hibernation was reanimated. No beat was skipped. No detail was overlooked. Everything that had already started simply continued where it left off. If something had not started yet, and this creation cycle was its time to, then it was held in idea form until creation could birth it and nurture it to fruition. Now is a good time to introduce the topic of free will, which has always been an important part of creation. God decided long ago that everything, every single thing, would have freedom of choice and would be able to decide with God or creation, or to decide of its own volition. This explains many unexplainable things in your world. Why did one seed germinate and bloom, and another one was barren? Why was one puppy born stillborn? Why did the car crash victim with fewer injuries die, and the one with the more severe internal injuries live on, only to be connected to machines for the rest of her life? Why did carbon monoxide poisoning kill everyone in the family, except the oldest member? It's hard to be simplistic in a complicated world, but freedom of choice is always at play. Creations can choose the path of least resistance and little to no suffering, or the path of suffering, and this choice is always laid out. It's laid out to a human, and it's laid out to a blade of grass. How can this be, you may ask? The answer is that humans each have an individual soul and belong to a soul group or collective, while plant and animal species only have group souls, until they too individualize, differentiate, and develop an individual soul.